Thank you so much, everybody. I'm so happy to be here. It's such an honor to be here with all of you. I can't tell you what it means to me to be able to speak to you about a topic that is very close to me and perhaps close to some of you. Because 1 in 3 women will be a victim of domestic violence during their lifetime. So chances are, if it hasn't happened to you, it's happened to somebody that you know. I just want to start off by asking a question, though. How many people here are involved with men who are good and kind and respectful and sweet most of the time? Can we get a show of hands here? Wow! Can we just give them a round of applause? I don't want to give anybody the idea that this is a male-bashing speech that I'm about to impart. There are a lot of good men in the world. My dad was one. There have been a lot of good men in my life, so I want to make sure that we all acknowledge that. So, jumping right in, here are some of the things that WomenSV does to help domestic violence survivors. Sometimes I'll say victims, sometimes I'll say survivors, and I know victims can sometimes not be a very politically correct term to use. We don't want to think of the victim mentality. But when I use the term victim, I mean as in a victim of a robbery, a victim of a crime. We have to be very careful to establish the fact that domestic violence is a crime, not a communication issue. If you're walking down the street, somebody jumps out of the bushes and hits you, assaults you, hopefully they're going to jail. If you share a child with that person, you could end up going to reunification therapy. I don't know if you can say that. What's the difference? That's an attack, but when it's an intimate partner, it's an attack on the most intimate level, a betrayal on the most intimate level by a partner who's supposed to love and respect you. So victim for victim of a crime, survivor for the ladies that I work with who are so brave and so strong and so powerful. It can happen to anyone. It's not just confined to somebody who grew up in a dysfunctional home or has a poor sense of themselves, low self-esteem. It happens to truly powerful, successful, wonderful, brave, courageous women. It can happen to anybody. So what we do is we do court, police station, and attorney accompaniment with our ladies. We offer a weekly support group. We do one-on-one education with them around all forms of domestic violence. Not just the more obvious ones like physical and sexual, but the more subtle and sophisticated ones. Because the more education you have, the more subtle you can be in the ways you control, manipulate, coerce. I see so many ladies nodding. I know you know people, even though you may be involved with good people now, I'm sure at some point in your history, you've met somebody like this, or you have somebody close to you who's been involved with someone like this. So let's try to figure out how to deal with them more effectively. We run a helpline. It's not a hotline, it's a helpline, and we connect women with resources, and some men too. We've worked with about 8 men over the last 6-7 years. We've worked with over 1,300 women in this time, and about 8 men. So it does have, as Michelle was saying, it does happen to men too. We do consults for lawyers and for therapists who have domestic violence clients, and I'm on several committees, including the Domestic Violence Death Review Team. And this is a team that is multidisciplinary, and it looks at cases that have ended up in the ultimate form of domestic violence, murder. And we try to learn from those cases for how to prevent that happening in the future. And we are a nonprofit sustained by donations. So when giving time comes around and you get that warm, fuzzy feeling in your heart, please don't forget WomenSV. Last year was a banner year for us in terms of putting this issue on the table. The focus of our work is direct client services, but we also do a lot of work out in the community, raising awareness about this issue. And as I mentioned, we do a lot of trainings for law enforcement, superior court, attorneys, medical staff. I gave a couple of trainings to Kaiser physicians last year. I did a training for Google Security, Oracle Security, as well as superior court and attorney organizations. And the Domestic Violence Conference, I gave 2 talks there last year. So it's all about educating the community and providers so they have a better understanding that domestic violence happens at all levels of society, not just the poor, uneducated, but the ultra-rich and ultra-sophisticated. So in terms of Raising awareness generally last year, I said it was a banner year. I was on the Megyn Kelly Today show, fortunate enough to be on the show with her, and whatever you might think of Megyn Kelly, I truly admire her. She took the whole hour and spent it on domestic violence in the affluent community. She dedicated her whole hour to that topic, and she's been very supportive of my program, so I'm deeply indebted to her. Yeah, thank you, Megyn. Yeah. There's me and Megyn. Last night I was very honored to receive the Jefferson Award for Public Service from CBS KPIX. They give out this award. So, thank you. We were in the New York Times and on Good Morning America. So it has been a wonderful year to raise attention, put attention on this issue and help to make women feel more comfortable reaching out. I've gotten calls from all over the country for women seeking services, and I actually had one fly across the country to start her life anew, fleeing a partner who has high-level security clearance and has stalked her in so many ways technologically that she had to flee to start her life, her identity anew. I'm a teacher by training. I'm not a therapist. I teach therapists. I'm not an attorney. I teach attorneys about this topic because both of those disciplines don't get a lot of education in domestic violence. I'm going to be talking about a small subset of abuser, the affluent abuser. You know, most people with power and money and wealth are good people. Most people in the world are good people. But I'm talking about this sort of, if we put abusers on a bell curve, I'm talking about the ones at the far end of the bell curve. The ones that tend not to have empathy or remorse, I'll give you a list of characteristics to look for in a little bit, but small subset of affluent professionals. I'm going to tell you some stories because I'm Irish and I can't help it. But I'll tweak some of the details to protect the innocent and the guilty. And I do want to acknowledge that men can be victims too. It's about power and control. It's about the abuse of power to control another person, and women can do it too. But because 85 to 95% of victims of domestic violence are female, when I talk about a victim or a survivor, I'm going to use the pronoun she. When I talk about a perpetrator, I'm going to use the pronoun he. And I think I violated the #1 rule. Don't shut off your cell phone before you enter a meeting. Sorry. The stories that I will share with you and the information I share with you come as a result of working with over 1,300 women. They're going to sound anecdotal in nature because they are, and why? Who keeps statistics on domestic violence survivors? Domestic violence organizations, police departments, hospitals, the very people that women in our demographic tend not to reach out to for help. So many women have never called the police. Then they go to court with an uninformed judge who says, it was so bad, why didn't you call the police? You know, they have no record of the abuse because they were afraid of what would happen if they called. He's going to come home from the police station at some point, and is he ever going to be mad? He could be the primary provider. He has connections in the neighborhood, in the community. What is he going to do to take revenge on her if she reaches out for help? So it's important to acknowledge that the prevalence is indeed very high. In fact, it could be even higher in middle to upper income areas because there's so many more tools at your disposal when you've got money, influence, power, connections. And because people tend to think it doesn't happen in the higher economic levels. Even people in our demographic think it doesn't happen in our demographic unless it's happened to them or someone they know. It's one of society's best kept secrets. But here's another secret. The two hardest income brackets to escape from are the lowest, well that's not a secret, but also the highest. And why? Because of all the tools he has at his disposal. We'll talk about them in a minute. We talked about the fact that it's an epidemic, a global epidemic. World Health Organization study, 1 in 3 women on the planet will be raped or beaten during her lifetime. 1 in 3. When you're walking down the street at night, are you looking for a woman to jump you at night? No. When you're getting to know somebody, always what you have to think when you're inviting somebody over to your house for the first time, am I going to be safe? Men don't have that worry. I think it was Margaret Atwood who said, what are men most afraid of? Being laughed at. What are women most afraid of? Being killed. Anybody can be a victim, anybody can be a perpetrator. Here are the careers typical of the ladies that I work with. Engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, stay-at-home parents. Some of these folks, they're the hardest on themselves because of their profession. I'm a doctor, I'm a healer, and yet I'm suffering. I'm a therapist. I'm all about helping people with emotional issues and dealing with trauma, and here I'm suffering from it myself. Here are the professions of their abusive partners: engineers, doctors, professors, lawyers, psychologists, entrepreneurs, CEOs, religious leaders, stay-at-home parents. Therapists who get inside their partner's head to manipulate, to make them think that they're going crazy, to make them think it's all about them, it's all their fault, they're to blame. Just a basic definition of domestic violence. Just this pattern of abusing their power to control another person. And it tends to be escalating, tends to get worse over time. Not just physical, but also also verbal, sexual, financial attacks. So if you look at, did anybody see Big Little Lies? Have you seen Big Little Lies? Oh yeah, you can watch that. What's it on Netflix now or Amazon Prime? If you get a chance to watch that with Nicole Kidman, Laura Dern, very powerful series, and they're having a second season now. Any behaviors that, and watch these words here, any behaviors that intimidate, manipulate, humiliate, isolate, frighten, terrorize, coerce, threaten, blame. I didn't have to touch somebody to coerce, control, threaten, and terrorize them. It's really easy to pick up the phone and dial 911 if somebody has just punched you. It's much harder to pick up 911 and say, help, my husband is killing my soul. He's undermining my relationship with my children. I used to be smart. I used to have confidence. I used to have joy. All gone. Very hard to call the police and tell them that. That's where I come in, to fill that gap between acts that rise to the level of legal action and acts that rise to the level of crushing someone over time. It could start on the playground, this abusive behavior, the abuse of power. Look at the little bullies out on the playground. Sometimes they're imitating bad behavior of their friends or something they've watched online or other sources. Sometimes they're imitating the way dad treats mom, or sometimes the way mom treats dad. But if not addressed, without early intervention, we've got to get into the schools. We've got to teach little girls, what does emotional abuse look like? What do you do if your partner starts to order for you in a restaurant, or tell you what to wear, or who to see, what to do, how to live your life, whether or not to get that job promotion, whether or not to stay home and raise the kids, or sacrifice everything and cross the country to support his career? Any one of these, taken in isolation, may not mean much, but when you put them all together and connect the dots, sometimes it takes women 25, 30 years to connect those dots. And by then, they're so firmly entrenched in that life that it's very hard to get out. So very, very important for us to teach our daughters how to recognize early warning signs of emotional abuse. Because if not addressed early on, it becomes teen dating violence. If not addressed then, when they go to college, we all know 1 in 5 women will be assaulted, sexually assaulted during her college years. Did you also know that 1 in 5 women will be a victim of intimate partner violence during her college years? 1 in 5. If not addressed then, carried forward again, intimate partner violence during the marriage, and left alone, possibly elder abuse. I have clients, I have survivors, I have women that I work with that fit every one of those categories. And then the beat goes on with the next generation. Children growing up with trauma can end up acting out that trauma or suffering from it. Carried forward long enough, it can take 20 years off your lifespan. So we must address it at an early age. Yes, it's all about power and control, verbal attacks, isolating her from her friends, minimizing what he said to hurt her, denying that he said, I never said that, I would never say that, I didn't push you, you fell, or what's the matter with you, you can't even remember what was said during the conversation. Undermining her relationship with the children, becoming a tyrant in his own home, turning the children into tyrants possibly, or victims. putting her on an allowance, telling her who she can see, threatening her, making her walk and sleep and live on eggshells. There's not a lot of physical abuse in that wheel, but you see how it gets into your head and damages almost every aspect of your life. There's a pattern that often emerges, where there's a period of peace, calm. Often you meet your partner during that period of peace and calm. You fall in love during that period of peace and calm. You fall in love with Dr. Jekyll. And then over time, ooh, you can tell, right? He comes home and there's that like sort of electric energy in the air. You're waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then it does. That verbal or physical emotional explosion. And then we have the cooling off period. Oh, he feels great, and now you're left carrying that energy inside you that's eating you up, starting to live in fear and shame, starting to separate yourself from your friends. You don't want to share this secret, this guilty secret you have. You're this powerful woman on the outside, and yet here you are, starting to live like a prisoner on the inside. And then there's peace again, and he's nice again. He may apologize, maybe not. In the more affluent areas, they tend to skip the apologies. Look at the lifestyle I'm supplying you with. Periods of peace, periods of calm. Sometimes it's called the honeymoon period. That's when a child is born. That's when another child is born. That's when she gives up her career. That's where she follows her husband to support him in his career. That's where she becomes a little more isolated, a little more dependent, and possibly over time a little more afraid. And then the tension builds. The explosion, and the beat goes on, the pattern goes on. But during those periods of peace, it can be very easy to go back to sleep and think, here's the man I married, the man I fell in love with, the man he could be again. And the dream is kept alive another year. Abuse thrives in secrecy, shame, and isolation. Those are the tools of the abuser. And the victim, the survivor, inadvertently ends up colluding with the abuser by being too ashamed to speak out, by isolating yourself. If you drive up in Los Altos Hills out in Portola Valley and you look at these beautiful mansions and these rolling estates, you might feel some sense of envy and think, oh my gosh, how wonderful, what an idyllic life. It is, if the partner you have loves you, respects you, cares for you and your children. Otherwise, it's a living nightmare. There's places out there that don't get cell phone coverage, and I've heard this more than once from my ladies who live in those places. There's no one there to hear you scream. So whether it's a little studio apartment in East San Jose, or a lovely estate in Portola Valley, the terror, the psychological torture can be the same. Evan Stark wrote a book called Coercive Control. He wrote the book, literally, on coercive control. He's a PhD in sociology. He was the driving force behind getting coercive control ruled illegal in the United Kingdom. We have a long way to go to catch up with Evan Stark. Coercive control impinges on every single person's fundamental human right to live in peace and safety and freedom in their own home. Every time there's domestic violence in a home, it violates that fundamental human right. Coercive control is a liberty crime. And we've got to start thinking about that on this side of the ocean. You don't have to hit somebody directly to control them. If I get mad at Robin, I'm not going to get mad at Robin because she's a family law attorney and a kick-ass attorney and she's a champion for domestic violence survivors. But let's say I'm married to Robin and I'm mad at her. I don't have to punch her directly to show her who's boss. I punch the wall beside her and she gets the message. First the wall. If you don't toe the line, next it could be you. Isolating her from her family and friends. Making fun of her if she goes out with certain friends. Or flirting with them. Making it hard for her to keep her outside network of support. Making fun of her in front of the children. Or she imposes some kind of disciplinary measure on a child and he undermines it. Keeping her up at night, waking her up in the middle of the night to rant and rave at her, and meanwhile she's got to get up at 6 in the morning to get the kids off to school and go off to work. Micromanaging every aspect of her life, invading her personal space. So we have one lady they lived in this beautiful big house, and he confined her to using the downstairs servants' quarters bathroom, and he would never let her put toilet paper in there. And while she was using the facility, he would come in, tower over her, and rant and rave at her. Can you imagine? Look at all the things, all the points that hits there, the humiliation, invading her personal space, the terrorizing her, depriving her of basic resources. They are crafty. So it's not any one blow that does it. It's chip, chip, chip away at their self-esteem. There's an Asian saying, death by 1,000 cuts. Over time, your self-esteem can get eroded. And these are the same tactics that are used to wear down prisoners of war. So is it any wonder that they end up with the same symptoms as prisoners of war? Anxiety, depression, PTSD. From Judith Herman, psychiatrist who wrote the book Trauma and Recovery. These kinds of symptoms that I just described are held in common with prisoners of war, hostages, and women and children in abusive situations. Being in an intimate partner relationship that's violent is a form of hostage situation. There aren't visible bars. There are invisible bars. So very hard to escape nonetheless. The power and control that she once had over her life slips away. And their home, which should be a sanctuary, turns into a cage. That's why the logo on my brochure is the bird fleeing the gilded cage. We've got the wrong idea about domestic violence, thinking that it doesn't happen in more affluent areas. So often our ladies are completely cut off from all sources of financial support. Their husbands have swooped in and either done it incrementally or in one fell swoop taken control of financial resources. But even if she is financially independent, does that mean her terror is any less, or she's in any less need of help, or at any less risk of being killed by her partner should she leave? We've got this idea in our community that our kids are going to go to a good school, they're going to get good grades, they're going to pick up an instrument and do well at it, they're going to join a team and do well, they're going to go to an Ivy League school and excel, they're going to meet a partner there on an equal level, get married, settle down in a nice neighborhood, and both of them will keep climbing that ladder of success, right? Failure is not an option. What part of domestic violence fits any of that picture? These two you may be familiar with. Here's OJ with Nicole. Here's Pamela Anderson with Tommy Lee. This one you might not be familiar with. Here's the patriarch here, Dr. Martin McNeil, and his wife, and his 8 children. We'll talk about him in a minute. Don't judge a book by its cover. We do that all too often. Looks like a duck, quacks like a duck. Could be a decoy. Are you all familiar with this optical illusion? Old lady, beautiful young lady. It's hard to see both of them at the same time, right? Hard to hold 2 opposite images in your head at the same time. What does a typical abuser look like? Okay, ladies, here's a test. In the middle, typical abuser that we think of, what's he wearing? White beater, thank you. He's got the uniform on, right? Every single face in this rogues gallery is the face of an abuser. And some of them have committed the ultimate act. Scott Peterson, George Hughley, the 5th. Anytime you've got a Roman numeral after your name, you've got to think, coming from money, right? We'll talk about him in a moment. O.J. Simpson, college student who killed his college student girlfriend. And who's this? Chris Brown. And, he's got a puppy. Appearances. Javash Shalal, we'll talk about him.
That's Abhishek Ghani, isn't it?
No, Javash Shalal, his other brother. Did you want to take a picture of that? Let's get back.
I got it.
You got it?
Thank you.
Yeah, you were mentioning Neha Rostokhi's husband, I think, but this is Javash Shalal. I'll tell you the story of Javash, G for short, in a moment. So yeah, to make this point, power and control dynamics are the same across all levels. But the more money, the more power you have to exercise those tools of coercion and control. When you've got a lot of money and influence, you can make it very hard for a woman to leave safely and stay safe, to keep custody of her children, and to maintain a standard of living anything like what she had before, or anything near her partners. I mentioned that I worked with over 1,300 women. And in the course of working with all these women, every now and again, one of them will say in our support group, I think we all married the same man. So let me give you a list of characteristics and behaviors that I've noticed after working with so many of these folks. And I want you to put your therapist hats on for a moment. You might be a therapist, but even if you're not, put your therapist hat on. When I give this talk to therapists, I ask them for the diagnostic label. I'm not qualified, but they are. Today, just for a moment, you are. Be therapists, come along with me, and let's take a look at these characteristics. Do you know anybody who fits this label? And let's be politically correct as we go through the list. They are highly educated, typically, advanced professional career, positive public image, they look good on paper, present well in public. These are all the positives here, folks. Often involved in volunteer or philanthropic work. They might give to worthy causes, they might coach their son's soccer team, might be a room parent. They're also charming, calculating, manipulative. They come from all races, all religions, all cultures. When you come to our support group, sometimes it looks like a United Nations meeting. So would their partners, if they ever met, and I think they do. I think there's an old boys network back there, and they're all plotting, and they're saying, how can I screw my wife out of spousal support and child support, and then they go to town. They tend to define their children in terms of their accomplishments, their GPA. It's about things, accomplishments, success. They are motivated by sex, money, winning, revenge, power, and control. And they've got this grand sense of themselves. It's all about them. They must be the center of attention. They're good at convincing others that their partner is crazy or abusive. So you've got to dip beneath the surface to find the truth. Here's the kicker. You still got your therapist hats on. They tend to lack empathy. They tend to lack remorse. They tend to lack self-reflection. They tend not to have any sense of conscience or moral maturity. And here, listen to this one. They often seem to almost enjoy causing pain to the very people they should be protecting the most. They lie easily. They lie often. They lie convincingly. They lie even when they don't need to. It's like they just want to keep in practice. And they'll put little authentic details in with the lies to make them more credible. They blame their partners for everything. They lack self-reflection. They lack accountability. It's never their fault. They would be the last person to acknowledge or admit, perhaps even to themselves, that they're an abuser. They must always be right. Even when they're wrong, they've got to be right. Very good at playing the victim. They're very good at shaming others, but God forbid you should shame them. That could be life-threatening. And they tend to view relationships in terms of war. I can't tell you the number of times my ladies have said, this is war, right? I will destroy you. Let's take no prisoners. Oh, dear God, help us. Do you want to take my, yeah, but just killed my phone there. Thank you. Jess, very good at thinking several moves ahead. Meanwhile, she's busy fighting fires as they come up, and she's not paying attention to that ambush that he's planning down the road. Business, they view relationships in terms of business. Like, what's in it for me? What's my return on investment here? Yeah, so what? You got cancer and you have to go to chemo. You pick up the kids. You get dinner on the table on time. And God, you got a few gray hairs, a few wrinkles now. You're just not looking like the woman I married. So every now and again, you're going to come up for a performance review. And God forbid you should not measure up because you're going to get traded in for a newer model. With all those characteristics and behaviors that I've just described, anybody have any thoughts? Therapists, what diagnostic label would you apply to this type of personality? Yay! All right. And for once, somebody in the audience didn't mention a name that rhymes with lump. You're all thinking it. I know you're thinking it. Okay. You nailed it. So not all sociopaths are running around, or psychopaths are running around robbing banks and being serial killers. Some of them are therapists. Some of them are surgeons. Some of them are religious leaders. G. Javash Shalal, raised in San Jose. He was a victim of hate crimes growing up, of Sikh origin. He dropped out of high school, like many Silicon Valley high school dropouts, went on to create a business that he sold for $350 million to Yahoo. And he also created a nonprofit that was designed to fight hate crime since he'd been a victim of that growing up. He donated $35,000 to a domestic violence human trafficking shelter in the city. He's been on Oprah Winfrey, and she was singing his praises, saying he's single, girls. There he is on Charlie Rose, another person on our, to beware of. So now, are you waiting for the other shoe to drop? All these good things he's done for the community. Oh, just one other thing. Caught on video in his own San Francisco penthouse, hitting and kicking his girlfriend 117 times. Domestic violence conviction, not just once, but twice. He had some powerful people advocating for him, so kept him out of jail for a long time, but not forever. We must not judge a book by its cover. Doctors, no offense to the physicians in the room. My dad was a doctor. I have high respect for physicians. My dad was a wonderful man. And most doctors are in it because they are healers. They want to help people. But just like every profession, you're going to find people in it who abuse any kind of power they're given. So one of my ladies, I hope it wasn't something I said. No, I'm so sorry. That's okay. So one of my ladies was asked by her attorney, why don't you let me fight harder to get a fair settlement for you? I can get so much more for you than you're letting me go after. She was still living with her husband during the divorce. But why? Why do you think? He had total control over the finances. What is she going to do, go out and be homeless? He had separated her from all her sources of support. So she told her attorney, you know why I don't fight harder for a fair settlement? You know what he told me over dinner the other night? He said, do you know there's more than 40 ways to kill a woman and make it look like she died from natural causes? So you can bet she backed off from that pretty quickly. That was a story told by one of my ladies. Here's one that made the news. Dr. Martin McNeil. Remember I showed you the picture of him with his brood, his 8 kids? Physician, attorney, bishop in his local church, murderer. He would brag to his mistress about how he could kill somebody and make it look like a heart attack. Yeah, look at his beautiful bride. Look at his beautiful family. And look what happened after he was caught. His own daughter saying, I'm just so glad he can't hurt anybody else.
Did he murder his wife?
He injected her full of drugs that made it look like she died from natural causes, a heart attack, after putting pressure on her to get plastic surgery. You can read the story online. He killed her, yes, he murdered her. So what does a domestic violence victim look like? Any one of these ladies, they are all victims of domestic violence. Some, the ultimate act of domestic violence, Yardley Love. Her parents made meaning out of what happened to her through the horrific actions of George Hughley, the 4th or 5th, by creating an online app, an app that you can download, college students can download, you can download called My Plan. It's Jackie Campbell's danger assessment that helps determine the level of danger that somebody might be in. Remember I pointed to the college student up in the upper left, in the rogues gallery, had killed his girlfriend. There she is, college student who was killed. Carmen Dow, Los Gatos resident, whose husband ended up killing himself and their child. Rihanna, Nicole, Neha Rastogi, who was on the Megyn Kelly Today Show. It was her talking to Neha Rastogi's case went viral because of the light sentencing, and it was that notoriety that led to NBC calling me and inviting me to be on the show as well. So bless her heart and her strength and her bravery for speaking up. Why do women stay? It's a question that I've heard judges ask, or police officers ask, general community members ask. So many reasons. Yes, there's the shame. Yes, there's financial dependence, wanting to keep the family together, not wanting kids to come from a broken home. But here's the horrible news, the home is already broken. fear of what he's going to do to her, what he's threatened to do to her, it covers the whole spectrum. The most dangerous time for a domestic violence victim is after she leaves the relationship. And I have had clients whose ultimate tragedy happened after they left. Many people think, well, I'm out of it now, he'll move on eventually. Doesn't happen. They tend to grab on and want to hold on and punish the person who's gotten away. 70% of domestic violence incidents happen after a woman leaves the relationship. And the more money he has, the more afraid they tend to be. Because even if he doesn't do it himself, he could end up paying somebody. There's Carmen Dow. Even with a restraining order, her husband ended up, he would beat her for buying a new dress or putting highlights in her hair. This very, very wealthy developer. Often you have a double standard there. He could buy whatever he wants, but God forbid she should spend money on herself. Another local story here, finance manager at Apple, killed by her husband a couple of years ago. Kaiser medical staff in our area, victims of domestic violence. Here's Judith Herman, again. Here's what the perpetrator often tries to do. He tries to make everybody forget about it, tries to keep it secret. If that doesn't work, he's going to go after the victim's credibility. She's crazy, she's the abuser, she's got something wrong with her. And if he can't silence her, if he can't shut her up absolutely, then he tries to make sure that nobody listens. One of the ways to do that is by making everybody think she's crazy. Gaslighting is very effective. If you get a chance to watch my clip from the Megyn Kelly Today show, I spent some time talking about gaslighting. Getting inside somebody's head, trying to make them doubt their own perception of reality. I never said that. I would never do that. What are you talking about? You can do very effective gaslighting using technology. I've had a lady who was pursued by a 2-inch drone. I had a lady coming up from, so she was a therapist. She fled Southern California to get away from her abusive partner. She's driving in her fancy car. Computers on wheels, that's what cars are nowadays. She uses a voice-activated command for her GPS to take her somewhere in the Bay Area. It's overridden by her husband's voice command, sending her back to Southern California. Oh, did I happen to mention he works in the high-tech satellite industry? Anything can be a source of surveillance now. My God, is nothing sacred anymore. Barbie! I could have, okay, so her husband has a restraining order against him. He gives the little girl a Barbie. And he says, I don't care what Barbie's asking you. Just have a little talk with Barbie tonight and let me know when Mom is coming, when she's going, who she's having over. You can have a conversation with Barbie, who has artificial intelligence now. It gets uploaded to the cloud with a password that he can access, and he can hear the conversation. These types of dolls have been banned in Germany because they can be used as surveillance devices. I've had ladies who've had hidden cameras put in their light fixtures, put in their smoke detectors, put in their cars. Then we have to worry about revenge porn. Taking Emma Watson's head and putting it on somebody else's body. That's called a deep fake. That's illegal now, but they still do it. Another ultimate victim of domestic violence, Rosalind Policarpio, her LinkedIn page, I'm sure she didn't put on there, Rosalind, I am cheating whore Policarpio. But that's what they do. They hack into your electronics. They stalk you through various means. Stalking isn't taken nearly seriously enough. For women, domestic violence victims who end up getting murdered, 80% of them have been stalked prior. Sometimes you're starting to look a little paranoid because, in fact, your every move is being watched. Financial abuse, taking over her access to funds, joint community assets, putting her on an allowance, punishing her for overspending. What do you call it when an employee steals money from an employer? Embezzlement. What do you call it when a husband steals the life savings from his wife?
Marriage.
What? A bad marriage, community property. Yes. So, things to look for in his behavior. These are things for you to think about. Maybe have a conversation with your sister, your daughter, your mother. Is she involved in a relationship where he's moving in quickly, sweeping her off her feet? Not all of these apply. The relationship could last for 3 or 4 years, and then she doesn't see anything different in him until she gets married, until she has a child. So none of these are foolproof, but they're all kind of pink flags, and taken in context over time, you can start to connect the dots. And if anybody's interested, I can send any part of this to presentation to Michelle, and she could, if that sounds okay to you, Michelle, you can forward it to whoever's interested. Please, let's get the information out here. Look for subtle signs of control. Is he ordering for her in the restaurant, telling her what to wear? Is he giving her the silent treatment if he doesn't like something she's said or done? Is he making fun of her in public, making jokes at her expense, checking in too frequently, texting her 1,000,000 times a day? In the beginning, you can look, oh, he's so sweet, he cares about me. Over time, that can look like stalking. Is he very suspicious or jealous whenever she talks to anybody else? Is he popping up out of nowhere to check on her at work? I had a lady whose husband made her FaceTime him going into the office and throughout lunch to make sure she wasn't fooling around with anybody and coming home. How does he talk about past family members? His mom, his sister. Were they all screwed up until she came along? How does he talk about women in general? Is he controlling around money? Is he very charming out in public? Does he really thrive on being the center of attention? Well, he could be introverted too. Remember, no single one of these is totally foolproof, but just look at the whole collection. Does he interrupt her, talk over her? Well, a lot of men do that, but is that, not all of them, but is that a consistent pattern that it's giving her the impression that his word is what rules the day? If she becomes the center of attention, does she also become the center of his wrath? Is he starting to make all the decisions? What's the impact on her? Is she starting to lose her self-confidence, getting more and more isolated, losing interest in her outside activities, absent more from work or school? If it's a kid, a daughter, or a son, are they starting to show signs of ADD or ADHD? Sometimes it's the way the brain works, it just works differently. Sometimes they're thinking about the chaos and the trauma that are going on at home. Is she starting to self-medicate with drugs, alcohol, food? Has she gained a lot of weight, lost a lot of weight? Does she appear to be afraid of upsetting her partner? Does she behave differently when he's around? Does she over-apologize? I'm sorry I said this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Just having to apologize for being. Remember, they're very good at keeping secrets. There's such social stigma attached to this issue in our community. Children are very good at keeping secrets. They will change their story before the CPS worker shows up, before the therapist gets a chance to talk to them, because they're afraid too. So what can you say? Please don't tell her. Don't pressure her to leave until she's ready. She's got to get all her ducks in a row. It takes some time to plan her strategy. Financial reasons are one of the main reasons why women go back. Don't judge her, blame her, pressure her, criticize her. Don't say, oh, well, there's two sides to every story, or he seems so nice. Don't recommend couples counseling. That can become another tool to coerce, control, manipulate her. Don't pressure her to get a restraining order. Here's some things you can say. I am concerned for your safety. I'm concerned for your children's safety. I'm concerned that it will only get worse. You don't deserve to be abused. No one deserves to be abused. It is not your fault. You are not alone. They feel so alone. They think I'm the only person this could ever be happening to. I'm a doctor, I'm a therapist, I'm a lawyer, I'm a CEO. How can I be a domestic violence victim? Let them know they're not alone. And let them know that you can help them, even if by referring them to somebody else. They can call me. Final thoughts. Remember, 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in your lifetime. Can I just ask for a show of hands here? How many people, after everything I've said, now are thinking they might know somebody, have met somebody, or been somebody, but often have known somebody who's been a victim of some form of the abuse I've talked about? Could you all please just look around? Whether I'm giving this talk to 10 people or 1,000, and I've given talks that cover the whole range, almost every single person in the room raises their hands. This is not just a global epidemic. Well, that makes it a local epidemic. So let's see what we can do to address it. And remember that nobody deserves to be abused. She didn't bring it on herself. It's not her fault. She can't control it. She can't fix it. In fact, the smarter women are, the longer they tend to stay in this type of relationship, thinking there's something that they can do to figure it out and fix it. She's figured everything else out. Not true. Not in this case. First thing that has to happen is for her to admit that she's powerless over her partner's decision to be abusive. And let her know she doesn't have to do this alone. There are people that can help. We did our show of hands. It's to end with Judith Herman here. It is very tempting to take the side of the perpetrator. All the perpetrator asks is that the bystander do nothing. He appeals to the universal desire to see, hear, and speak no evil, just to stand by. The victim, on the contrary, asks the bystander to share the burden of pain. The victim demands action, engagement, and remembering. Let's please be engaged, let's remember, and let's reach out and help those who are in need. Thank you so much. A couple of minutes for questions.
So we have like 2 questions, time for 2 questions.
Okay.
Who would like to go?
So, thank you so much for this presentation. This was super important. I have lived through all that, and now my daughter's living through it. So there's 2 important points that I want to bring, and actually I'm doing more.
Oh, here, let me give you the mic.
Sorry. So actually, because of this, I started doing an academic ethnography called Aphrodite's Laundries. Because of this, in coaching programs. But I have to add that on my site, so if you go tonight, I'll add the blog where I'm collecting stories. But 2 important things that people don't realize. When you're in such a middle class or higher class income, and you go through the door, so many women drop down in their income. There's no more Rolexes. There's no more fancy cars. They have gone for $200,000 income, per year if they were working, to food stamps. So there's a huge stigma. And I really call on the city leaderships to create funds and counseling and grants for these circumstances. Because what happens is a lot of the children, right, they end up going from a certain economic level, and now they have to move, and now they're at lower income levels, and they have gone through the trauma of the abuse, and now to a different circumstance. So to help maintain the stability of the family. So I really call on our city leaders to do something about that.
Absolutely. Here. That's a
And second of all, I was just going to say more pressure on the court system. Because the social discourse, there's too many abusers, including eye surgeons, who still have their license after witnesses have been punching their wives, setting their scarecrows on fire, and the courts are not recognizing it. So there's something has to be done. So thank you so much for this.
Oh, thank you for your wonderful. Thank you so much for the comments.
Last question.
Hi, I used to be a police officer, and I went on a lot of domestic violence calls, and the strangest thing would happen sometimes, and that would be we'd take a woman who was being stabbed, take her to a safe house, and then 2 days later they would call the husband, the abuser, up and reveal the safe house. And over time I began to realize that my theory of it is that they've grown so used to negative attention that no attention is worse. Which is sad.
Absolutely, I think you're so right. It's a reason why shunning is practiced in the Amish community, right? That neglect, turn away, not acknowledge somebody is almost as painful, as more painful sometimes than actually being. Thank you for your service as a police officer, for being one of the good guys. Thank you again for your kind attention, and I hope as women we can all band together and lift one another up, to reach out. If you could go home and have conversations with your family, with your sons. Let's teach our sons what it is to be a man, that tears are okay, being gentle is okay, that for women it's okay to be kick-ass and strong and a woman warrior and soft when we need to be.